Dr. Mira Lorne had exactly 47 minutes of oxygen left when she felt the tiny claws on her back. The escape pod had crashed 3 days ago on Kelris 9, a planet marked uninhabitable apex predator density critical in every Federation database. Her research vessel had been ambushed by raiders, and she'd barely made it to the pod before the ship tore apart. Now she crouched in a cave system, her exosuit's life support failing, her emergency beacon silent in the magnetic interference that blanketed this cursed world. The claws dug in deeper, piercing through the torn section of her suit near her shoulder blade. Mira froze. She'd seen the predators of Kelris 9 through her helmet's thermal imaging, 10-foot-tall monsters with obsidian scales, 6 eyes, and jaws that could snap reinforced steel. She'd watched one tear apart a crashed supply drone like it was made of tissue paper. This was it then, killed by something small enough to climb her back, probably a juvenile. At least it would be quick. But the creature didn't bite. Instead, it made a sound, a soft, chittering trill that vibrated against her spine. Then it climbed higher, tiny claws finding purchase on her suit's utility belt, her shoulder finally perching on top of her helmet. Mira slowly tilted her head back and activated her helmet's external cameras. 2 enormous golden eyes stared down at her, set in a face no bigger than her fist. The creature was covered in soft, downy scales that shimmered with an iridescent purple sheen. It had 6 eyes just like the adults, but these were wide and curious rather than cold and predatory. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, and it trilled again, a sound of pure, innocent curiosity. Karith. The word came unbidden to her mind. She'd studied enough xenobiology to recognize imprinting behavior when she saw it. This wasn't an attack. This was a baby that had just decided she was its parent. "Oh no," Mira whispered. "No, no, no. Your real mother is going to eat me." As if summoned by her words, a roar split the air outside the cave, a sound so deep and primal that it made Mira's bones vibrate. The cub on her helmet chirped in response, then scurried down her body and pressed itself against her chest, trembling. Mira's xenobiologist brain kicked into overdrive despite her terror. The cub was afraid. It was hiding from the roar. That meant the adult outside wasn't its mother. It was a threat. And if this cub had imprinted on her, it had probably been abandoned or separated from its nest. The roaring grew closer. Mira could hear heavy footfalls, the scrape of claws on stone. She had 2 options: stay here and hope the adult didn't find them, or run deeper into the caves and hope her oxygen lasted long enough to find another exit. The cub, Karith, she'd started calling it in her head, looked up at her with those impossibly large eyes. It trilled softly, a sound of absolute trust. "Damn it," Mira muttered. She couldn't let this tiny thing die. Not when it had chosen her. She scooped Karith into her arms and ran. The cave system was a labyrinth of narrow passages and vast chambers filled with bioluminescent fungi. Mira's oxygen counter ticked down. 32 minutes, 28, 23. Behind her, the adult predator had entered the caves, its hunting calls echoing off the walls. But something strange was happening. Every time Mira turned a corner, Karith would chirp and tug at her suit, pulling her in a specific direction. At first, Mira thought it was random, but then she realized the cub was guiding her, away from dead ends, away from unstable passages, toward something. 17 minutes of oxygen left. They emerged into a massive chamber, and Mira's heart sank. It was a dead end, a circular room with walls too smooth to climb and no other exits. The adults' roars were getting closer. She'd led them both into a trap. Then Karith leaped from her arms and scurried to the center of the chamber. The cub began to dig frantically at the ground, its tiny claws surprisingly effective against the packed earth. Mira watched, confused, until she saw what the cub had uncovered. A metal hatch, old and corroded, but unmistakably artificial. "You brilliant little creature," Mira breathed. She pulled the hatch open just as the adult predator burst into the chamber. It was even more terrifying up close. Scales like armor plating, muscles rippling under its hide. Those 6 eyes locked onto her with predatory focus. Mira grabbed Karith and dropped through the hatch, slamming it shut behind them. Claws scraped against metal above, but the hatch held. She'd bought them time, but her oxygen was down to 9 minutes. The passage below was part of an ancient structure, possibly left by the planet's long-extinct native civilization. Emergency lights flickered to life as Mira moved through it, her suit's sensors detecting a breathable atmosphere ahead. The structure must have maintained its own environmental systems. 5 minutes of oxygen. She found the airlock and cycled through, praying it still worked. When the inner door opened, she collapsed on the floor, ripped off her helmet, and gasped. The air was stale but breathable. She was alive. Karith climbed onto her chest and nuzzled against her face, purring, an actual purr like some bizarre alien cat. "You saved us," Mira said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us both." Over the following days, Mira discovered the structure was an old research outpost, abandoned but functional. She repaired her beacon using salvaged parts. Karith stayed close, learning to trust her completely. Mira taught it to hunt using food synthesizers. It taught her which passages were safe, which sounds meant danger. When the rescue ship finally arrived 2 weeks later, the Federation officers were shocked to find Dr. Mira Lorne alive, and even more shocked to find her with a juvenile, Calrissian apex predator curled up in her lap like a house. "Pet, that's impossible," the captain said. "Those things are unstoppable killing machines." Mira smiled and scratched behind Karith's headplates, eliciting a happy trill. "That's what everyone said about wolves once. Then humans decided to make friends instead of enemies. We're good at that. Finding family in the strangest places." Karith looked up at her with adoring golden eyes, and Mira knew she'd never leave this world without her strange, deadly, perfect little companion. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to look at the galaxy's most terrifying predator and say, "I'm going to teach you to love me." And somehow, impossibly, it worked every time.